Amendments. Amendment 16 of the United States Constitution authorized income taxes in their present form and was ratified on February 3, 1913. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration, states the amendment, overturning all the principles of taxation without representation on which basis was fought the Revolutionary War. The European banking community centered in London had finally won the Revolutionary War. In order that money could buy a senatorial seat directly to control all future legislation, Amendment 17 of the United States Constitution was ratified on April 8, 1913, and first in effect for the election of 1914. It amended Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution, and it changed laws towards direct election of senators by the people of a state, rather than their election or appointment by a state legislature as the Founding Fathers had designed. Now, money could buy seats on the Senate, which was vital to the banking cartel because it is the Senate that decides which legislation from the House would become law. While neither amendments have been constitutionally ratified, the courts to this day do not challenge their legality. Congressman Charles A. Lindbergh, father of the famous aviator, warned the country in 1913 that the Federal Reserve Act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth. When the President signs this act, government by the money power will be legitimized. The new law will create inflation whenever the trust wants inflation. From now on, depressions will be scientifically created. The Federal Reserve Act, also called the Glass-Owen Bill, was passed by the Senate on the evening of December 23, 1913, by a vote of 43 to 25, with 27 senators absent or abstaining. President Woodrow Wilson signed it into law 1 hour later. The fate of the United States was sealed and delivered into the hands of the European banking aristocracies. The Federal Reserve is neither federal nor does it have enough gold to back up what it lends. The Fed is a cartel of banking families, dominantly European, and lend money to the United States and forces citizens of the United States to pay the interest with their tax dollars. Barry Goldwater, the late senator from Arizona, who ran against Lyndon Johnson in 1964 for president, said, "Most Americans have no real understanding of the operation of international moneylenders. The bankers want it that way. We recognize in a hazy sort of way that the Rothschilds and the Warburgs of Europe and the houses of J.P. Morgan, Kuhn Loeb and Company, Schiff, Lehman, and Rockefeller possess and control vast wealth. How they acquire this financial power and employ it is a mystery to most of us. International bankers make money by extending credit to governments. The greater the debt of the political state, the larger the interest returned to the lenders. The national banks of Europe are actually owned and controlled by private interests. The federal government of the United States does not own any portion of the Federal Reserve, nor can common citizens own stakes in this cartel. The Federal Reserve does not publish audited accounts, but is paid over $150 billion a year by the American taxpayers. This central bank regularly creates periods of inflation or deflation in a scientific method that creates enormous profits for these banking families at the expense of over 99% of the population. Today, Chase Bank, J.P. Morgan Rockefeller-owned, and Citibank Rockefeller-owned have the majority control of shares of the Federal Reserve. In concert with the Rockefellers, the Habsburg elite, which included the soon-to-be-named Windsors, premeditated a world war to consolidate their power. The Ludlow massacre was an early indication of the length to which the Rockefellers would go to achieve their goals. Rockefeller lusted after the Russian Baku oil fields owned by the nobles. However, Tsar Nicholas, on Rasputin's advice, was not willing to involve Russia with the Rockefellers. Rasputin also counseled the Tsar against going to war with Germany, which was also Habsburg-controlled, and for this attempts were made on Rasputin's life. Kaiser Wilhelm, the last emperor of Germany and king of Prussia, was a first cousin to King George V of England, of the British German Saxe-Coburg-Gotha family in Britain, soon to be renamed as the Windsors. Wilhelm's mother was Queen Victoria's daughter. Kaiser Wilhelm's personal banker was Max Warburg, who had helped manipulate the Federal Reserve into being. Wilhelm's leading advisor was Otto von Bismarck, who was the leading German Freemason. The point of the war from this German and British-German leadership, the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha-Warburg-Del Banco family, was to centralize control of Europe and run the continent from their central banking sites in London. The cabal already financially controlled Great Britain and recently gained large control of the United States through the Federal Reserve Act. Now they sought to reorganize Europe in a strategy towards globalization in the 20th century. The Habsburg-Rockefeller cabal plotted to set up a group to be known as the Council on Foreign Relations, through which they could orchestrate internal commissions within a new organization, the League of Nations, and set its agenda. In this fashion, the Habsburg-Rockefeller cabal could, with near invisibility, originate binding treaties between nations leading to their increased control of a host of countries around the world. The cabal was completely willing to commit mass murder and genocide in order to achieve this end. Archduke Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was the initial victim, assassinated by a Serbian Freemason agent working for Habsburg interests in order to create an excuse for Germany to wage war. Over in the U.S., Woodrow Wilson promised that he would not allow America to become involved in a European war, but the J.P. Morgan Pasteur interests who brought Wilson to power, in concert with one Colonel House and the British statesman Winston Churchill, succeeded in involving America in 1917. The device? The sinking of the Lusitania in 1916 purposefully sank in order to generate a public backlash which would pull the United States into war with Germany. Evidently, modern scholars like Colin Thompson have shown that Woodrow Wilson knew 4 days beforehand that the Lusitania was carrying 6 million rounds of ammunition plus explosives. Lord Mersey, who headed a British board of inquiry, would later remark that the Lusitania case was dirty business. While Lord Mersey blamed the Lusitania's captain, as His Majesty's government had instructed him to do, he resigned, rejected his fee, and from that date on refused to handle British government commissions, indicating his disgust with Britain's highest authorities. This conspiratorial elite should have been brought to trial for treason, but that would presume the system for the elite cabal is based on justice. Millions would die in World War I. 500,000 men died in the trenches in northern France in horrible bloody battles in which poison gases manufactured by Germany's IG Farben were used. By May 1, 1918, the Bolsheviks controlled only a very small portion of Russia and were dangerously close to being eliminated until a committee created by Wall Street oil, weapons, banks, and transportation sectors helped finance and support the Bolsheviks. The Communist Party USA had nothing to do with this organization. It was created by corporate elements to finance one side of a foreign war without the constitutional right or directive to wage war in another country. The American League to Aid and Cooperate with Russia, officially organized in public in Washington, D.C., was led by Standard Oil's George P. Whalen of subsidiary Vacuum Oil Company as treasurer, Coffin and Odin of General Electric, Thompson of the Federal Reserve System, and Willard of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. This group of international bankers backed the Bolshevik Revolution and subsequently profited from the establishment of a Soviet Russia. The very people who engineered World War I on all sides were appointed to attend the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. The host of the conference was Baron Edmund de Rothschild, a leading campaigner for a Jewish state in Palestine, where the cabal could profit off of perpetual conflict for decades to come. In addition, Rockefeller Jr. provided the funding for the construction of the Palestine Archaeological Museum in East Jerusalem, the Rockefeller Museum, which quarantines the Dead Sea Scrolls. Out of the Paris Peace Conference came the World Court in The Hague, Netherlands, and the League of Nations, formed on June 28, 1919, an organization secretly intended to further the cabal's goal of a one-world global government. It was determined that the League should convene at the Palace of Versailles, known also as the Palace of the Sun King, symbolically very meaningful to the banking cabal. In the 1920s, John D. Rockefeller Jr. donated a substantial amount towards the restoration of the Palace of Versailles. Rockefeller Jr. endowed a major library for the League in Geneva in order to rewrite history as he and the cabal saw fit. Rockefeller Jr. also financially supported many of the programs of the League of Nations, all the while focusing on a brain trust for the cabal to be known as the Council on Foreign Relations, which he officially funded